All right, so here's what we're going to do. Today we're going to talk about, okay, now that I got an appointment, because last week we finished with talking about how to set appointments. So now that we've got the appointment, what are we going to do with it? So here's where I want to start with today. So what I want you guys to do, both you guys that are on Zoom and also you guys that are here live, is I want you to write down. So let's assume that I'm your client, okay? So we met somehow, whether it was you were outdoor knocking, I was for sale by honor, expired, whatever, it doesn't matter. Well, but let's do actually as a buyer. So we're talking about me as a buyer first, okay? So we met somehow, and I've come to your office. We've now exchanged niceties, whatever, and we're now sitting in a conference room. We're going to now start to talk about what I want to buy as a home and what you're going to show me in terms of showing me homes. What I want you guys to write down 2 or 3 questions that you would ask me that would help you to know what I'm looking for in a home. Does that make sense? So what are the 2 or the 3 questions that you would ask me that would help you to
Hey Ross, I'm sorry, but I can't hear anything. It shows that Century 21 Everest is mute.
Thanks, sorry. Thanks for letting me know, Robert. Everything I've just said, the people on Zoom didn't hear a word about it. So, okay. So what I was saying, I'm guessing somebody's calling me to tell me right now too, but yeah, so let me restate. Sorry for you guys that are here in live, but we're going to assume that I'm a buyer of a house. I want you guys that are on Zoom, write down 2 or 3 questions that you would ask me that would help you know what type of properties you're going to show me. Okay, so for you guys on Zoom, write down 2 or 3 questions you would ask a buyer. If you had a buyer come into your office today, what 2 or 3 questions would you ask them that would help you to know what properties you're going to show them? So, all right. While you're doing that, I'm going to go through, and actually, let me ask you this question: is what do you think the top 3 complaints about real estate agents are?
Not listening to what they're saying.
Okay, good. So the number one actually is, well, so actually I'm going to do number two. What you said is number two is that we don't listen.
I would think one would be, okay, my range is like 400,000, and then everybody sends them a bunch of $500,000 homes.
Okay, so that's actually number three, is that we waste their time.
There's too many of us.
Nope, they don't complain about that.
Is being pushy one of them?
Number one is that we don't
Care.
return calls.
We don't return calls. Wow.
That's the number one complaint about real estate agents. So number one is that we don't return calls. Number two is that we don't listen. And number three is that we waste their time. Now, which usually when I teach this and I've got more seasoned agents in the class, they will say, no, it's the other way around. They waste our time, not that we waste theirs. But they look at it as that we waste their time. Now, I'm going to explain to you why this is, why they have the experience of us wasting their time and that we don't listen. And part of it is what Swen already said, is that they tell us what they want, and then we send them properties that are higher priced or whatever that don't meet what they're looking for. Okay. Now with that, let me ask you this question. Why do people buy anything?
Because they want it.
Okay.
Or they need.
Or they need it in.
Okay, good. So now let me ask you this. So what we're going to be talking about today is really behind that of why do people buy anything? Okay. Now, how would you respond if I said this? Nobody buys anything they don't need.
It's not true. It's true, but not true.
Okay. Well, what do you mean it's true but not true?
In their mind, they might need it, even if they really don't.
Okay. So can you give me an example? Somebody give me an example of something they bought that they don't need.
Um,
Curling iron.
A curling iron. Okay. So
I was gonna say a boat, because people use it the first month and then they don't use it at all.
okay. So here's what happens is a curling iron or a boat, we go buy it and we don't really need it.
I need a
So yeah, you do. Your hair is so straight.
curve. I know.
So why do they go buy it then? If they don't need it,
That instant, that gratification they're able to. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, how many times do people go car shopping and they don't buy anything, but when they do, it feels good for 5 seconds until they're paying for it.
okay, good. So when I said to you, nobody buys anything they don't need, and Trevor said it's true, but it's not true. So here's what I mean by that. When I say nobody buys anything they don't need, there are two types of needs. Okay, so we're going to, today's class is to get into talking about needs analysis, basically. So there are two types of needs. There are real needs, and then there are perceived needs. So we typically, if I say to you, nobody buys anything they don't need, and typically if somebody was going to argue with me on that, then what they would say is, well, a boat. They went and bought a boat. They don't need a boat. You don't really need a boat, right? Well, when I say nobody buys anything they don't need, and typically you're going to think of real needs. Real needs are going to be food, shelter, clothes, things like that. Is it kind of warm in here?
Yes.
Because I was like, I'm roasting.
It's like freezing outside.
Although I don't know. I think these are more for decoration. The thermostats. I think they're more for decoration than actuality, but we'll see if it cools it off here. All right.
It's a lot of windows you don't open.
I know, right? So nobody buys anything they don't need. There are two types of needs. There's real needs and then there's perceived needs. And a real needs food, shelter, clothes, those type of things. So when I say nobody buys anything they don't need, typically people in class will think of food, shelter, clothes, those type of things. But there are perceived needs as well, meaning that sometimes we go and buy things because we perceive that we need that boat. We perceive that we need the curling iron or whatever. So we have these perceived needs that to other people may seem like, well, yeah, that's just stupid. I don't know why you would go and buy a boat or whatever. But inside, and what Swen said is right, is there is some need that's going on inside that they're satisfying that need is why they go and do it. Okay. So now, with that being said, let me go to the next piece of this. So the next step of this is I want to show you how your brain works. We're going to talk a lot about how the brain and how it works. And I've given you guys a little bit of demonstrations of that before when I asked you guys if you wanted to know what was going on a mile down the road, are you going to ask a turtle or a giraffe? And the way that the brain works is it responds according to the information that it is given. And that's why none of you said to me, well, I wouldn't ask a giraffe or a turtle because they're not going to be able to tell me what's going on. Instead, you answered the question by saying, well, I'd ask the giraffe because logically you're thinking, well, his neck's higher and he could see further down the road than what the turtle can see. Now, so the way that our brain works, though, is like this. 10% of who you are is conscious. 90% of who you are as a personality is unconscious, meaning that we are doing a lot of the things that we do it in an unconscious way, meaning, and I don't know if I've said this to you guys yet or not, but if I did, it's a good reminder. If I didn't, then I'll need to say it. But your thinking is out of sync with reality by a half of a second. Meaning when you think you're doing something, you've actually, by a half of a second, already done it. So when I say to you 90% of who you are is unconscious, think of it as our brain gets wired. And once that wiring takes place, we essentially can then let the unconscious mind take over for us. Think about driving. When you first learned how to drive a car, like you had to be like, okay, foot on the gas, ready to push the brake, hands at 10 and 2 or whatever, on the steering wheel, ready to go. And now, though, you have driven enough typically that what can happen is you just can jump in the car, you can be talking on the phone, texting, right? I mean, no, you don't do that, right? But eating a hamburger or whatever, you could be doing half the time you're driving with your knee because you're texting or something like, but think about how early on, how stressful it was. In fact, I remember when I was in driver's ed, the driver's ed teacher that I had was way sexist. Like he always was commenting about women drivers and women can't drive and this and that. Well, so we were at our the range at the school where you would practice driving basically in the parking lot. And I remember I got into this car and there was two of us. So there was me and then some female, I don't even know who it was, but I remember she got in and was driving and I was sitting in the passenger seat and my driver's ed teacher came over and we had the windows all were rolled down because that he could then yell if he wanted somebody to stop or whatever. But so the windows are down. He comes over and he leans down into the window and he tells me, so this car that we were in had the emergency brake in between the driver and the passenger. Well, I'm sitting in the passenger seat. She's in the driver's seat. And he leans down and says, she can't drive, right? She doesn't know what she's doing. So you keep your hand on that emergency brake so she doesn't run through the fence. Well, we're then driving around and I don't remember what happened. He yelled something. So that's why we always had to have the windows down. He yelled something to her like stop or something. And she hit the gas instead of the brake. And we were going straight for the fence. So I yanked up on the emergency brake and stopped the car. And I don't know what my point in telling you that story was. Oh, just about how early on when we're first learning to drive, ultimately, like we panic and we hit the gas versus hitting the brake, which it was kind of ironic though, because if he had not leaned down and said, keep your hand on that emergency brake, I probably would not have even thought to do it. We probably would have run through the fence. But anyway, but so here's the thing. The way that your brain works is when you're learning something, it's wiring it. And once it's wired, then the unconscious takes over. So when I say on this that 90% of who you are is unconscious, what I'm saying is there's a lot of wiring that has gone on in your brain that is making decisions. So most of what you do during the day, you are doing it at an unconscious level. We're only conscious about 10% of the time when we're interacting. Now, why is that important? Why am I telling you all that? Well, because that 10% is where things are logical, things are reasonable, things are rational. Down here in the 90% is where things are illogical, unreasonable, and so as a result of that, when I said to you, nobody buys anything they don't need, see, we typically are going to think of that in terms of this 10% of the conscious side. So we're going to say, well, yeah, no, people buy stuff that they don't need all the time because we're thinking in this conscious part of the brain where the 10% is where is logical, it's reasonable, it's rational. But when we buy something down here in this 90% part is where things are emotional. Okay. Now, buying a house, is that typically an emotional purchase or logical?
Can be both.
Yeah, I mean, it can be both, but typically,
Broadly, it's emotional.
Hugely
it's more
emotional.
of, say that again, Austin.
Hugely emotional because they've got, their life is changing. They're spending a lot of money.
Good. That's exactly right. So, so most of the time it's an emotional thing that's going on. Now, as a result of that, here's what happens. We're going to assume, I had you guys already write down some questions. We're not going to use those questions still yet, but I had you guys write down some questions. And what happens though is when you ask those questions to a buyer, here's what happens is they start to think about and answer the question that you've asked. They're going to answer it based on the 90%, what's going on underneath that is under the surface of why they're buying. But when they're going to talk to you, they're going to talk to you up here in the 10%, where it's logical, it's reasonable, it's rational. So think of what happens with this in terms of communication is they're explaining what they want to you up here at this level. Well, what happens then is they communicate that and tell it over to you here. You then receive it at the 10% level, at this conscious level, but then you're going to interpret it down here as to what that means to you in your 90%. Okay? So now keep in mind, what we're talking about here is the frustration that people have with us is we don't return calls, we don't listen, and we waste their time. Well, where that comes from is that they're explaining what they want to us at this, it starts at this level, comes up to here, they then explain it to you, you receive it and interpret it down here what it means to you. Now, we're going to spend a lot of time on this today and tomorrow of me helping you understand how this works. But the reason that people have the experience that we don't listen and we waste their time is because they're telling us one thing, but we're interpreting as it's something else. So here's the next thing I would say to write down and have in your notes. When we communicate, when all of us are communicating, we will communicate one thing, but we mean something else. So when we're talking and having a discussion with people, and specifically we're talking today about with buyers and sellers, when we're having a discussion with them, we will communicate one thing, or they will communicate one thing, but they actually mean something else. So when we communicate, or we say one thing, but we actually mean something else. Okay? So that's where part of this frustration comes from that people have, that they say that we don't listen and we waste their time, is because they communicate one thing to us, but they mean something different than what they communicate. Now I'm going to show you what that looks like here in just a minute. But before that, the next piece that I need to get in place. So think of it as like, to some extent, a lot of this training that we're going to do today is we're building upon each other. So we're going to start with kind of these bricks that we're putting in place, and we're just laying brick after brick after brick, okay? So far, what I've told you guys is that the top 3 complaints people have about us: we don't return calls, we don't listen, and we waste their time. Then the way that our brain works, though, is that it's 90% of it is unconscious, 10% is conscious. We communicate one thing when we mean something else. Now, it's important that you understand this whole thing about that 90% of who you are is unconscious, and that's where the emotion lies. Because the top 5 complaints, or excuse me, not 5 complaints, top 5 most stressful events in a person's life. What do you guess? What are the a survey was done and they asked, what are the most stressful events that people tend to have?
Baby, being born.
Divorce.
Okay, good. Number one is divorce. Number two is death. So to some extent, when they said death, though, I almost wonder if it should be either adding to or taking away from the family, meaning like somebody in the family being born or dying. Okay, what else? What other things would be stressful that people go through? Okay, good. So number three actually was moving.
Getting married. We have to plan it.
Getting married wasn't.
Job and a safe career.
Okay, so I'm gonna put it as job change is kind of a better way. So, and the reason I say job change rather than new job is sometimes maybe it's they lost their job creates the stress, or it's a new job that's new to them or transferring, whatever. Okay, job change. What else?
Bankruptcy.
Good. I'm gonna call it financial issues. Yeah, right? Okay. Now, so let me ask you the next question on this. A couple things that I want you guys to make sure you notice on this. How many of those are we involved
One, a lot.
in? Yeah, so ultimately, like every single time we're involved in this one, right? Every time we're involved in moving, but stop and think about how many times does somebody getting divorced lead to a move?
Nick, the guy that kid we're working with, like the only like 3 or 4 people he's talking with right now, it's all getting divorced.
Yeah. So notice that though, that someone's getting divorced, they need to move. Somebody dies, or we say an addition to the family, we need a bigger house, or we need a smaller one, or my spouse died and I need to move on. Okay, so death, moving. How about job change? Yeah, so either they lost the job and can't afford the house anymore, or they got a new job and it's making more money, so they want to buy a new one, or we got to transfer for our job, or what about the financial issue? See, notice this though, here's what I want you guys to see, is notice that of these 5 most stressful events in a person's life, we are involved for sure every time with this moving part of it. But look at how many times they're moving because of a divorce, like Trevor was saying about Nick, or they died and they're moving, job change, moving, financial issue. So you can see that these are highly stressful events. Now, notice this too. Notice the type of income that people make that deal with divorce. Attorneys make pretty good money that are divorce attorneys, right? And in fact, we used to have an agent here at this office that would come rolling up in all of these like fancy cars. And the license plate on one of them was prenup. And what I found out is his
Audi R8.
yeah. So his dad was an attorney that basically did prenup for people and just made it tell me.
That car, I parked next to it one of the first times I came to the office.
Did
I was
you?
like, look at this. I might have.
Yeah, well, and I've seen him, like he came in a McLaren one day. I've seen him in the R8, like a number of different cars. His dad had a lot of money. So now what about morticians? Or I guess, are they called morticians now?
Yeah.
Funeral directors, I think the more proper term now. I don't know. But notice they make pretty good money. Job change. I mean, that one's not so much, but financial issues, the bankruptcy attorneys. Notice that we are dealing with people. So here's the main point I want you to get from this. We are dealing with people in one of the most stressful events of their life. Did you get it?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there you go. Can I show these?
Yeah.
So here's the.
So his dad, it's his dad's car.
Yeah. essentially.
Oh my god. There's something about vantage plates that just bring me out. Oh my god. It is.
Yeah. So all right. So here's the point though. So back to this. The main thing I'm wanting you guys to get from this is we are dealing with people in one of the most stressful events of their life, which as a result of that means that there's some pretty high emotion involved in what's going on with them. And we are going to be helping people in one of the most, if not 2 or 3 of the most stressful events in a person's life. And so because of that, it's going to be a very emotional scenario that we're going to be dealing with them. And so part of why I say that is, again, remember, your thinking is out of sync with reality by about a half of a second, which means we're operating on autopilot most of the time in our life. And so when we're dealing with people who are in a very stressful scenario, they're going to be operating from that same standpoint. Okay, now with that in mind, let's do the next piece of this. So then, in fact, actually, let me look at my notes real quick. I just want to make sure I feel like I'm forgetting something. I think we're good. Just making sure I didn't. Yep, no, we're good. Okay. So now I had already mentioned to you guys, we're going to assume that I'm the buyer of a house. So everything we're going to talk about today is going to be the buyer side. The first part of tomorrow will be buyer side, then we'll get into the seller side, and then Wednesday will be seller side. Okay, so as we go through this. Now, so I'm at your office. You've asked me the questions I had you guys write down. Okay, so we're going to assume you've asked me those questions, and that here's what I've told you. Okay, is that I have told you I want to buy a home that is high on a hill with a view of the city lights. Okay, so if I said to you, I want to buy a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights. Now, with that being the case, if that's what we've landed on that I want to see, is a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights, what are you going to show me? And I don't need you to tell me like specific areas. I don't need that. But just in general, if I said I wanted a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights, what are most people going to go out and show that buyer?
$1 million houses, big giant,
Okay, but where?
up in the upper avenues.
Well, yeah, and I don't need specifics. Like but like just give me the general specifics. You're going to go show me homes that are what?
Up in the hills on the mountain.
Yeah, perfect. So that makes sense, right? You're gonna now go find homes that are high on a hill with a view of city lights to show me. Is anybody not gonna do that? So I'll even look at the chat box here to see if anybody says they're gonna do that. Anybody gonna do something different than that? So I'm assuming everybody's gonna go show me homes high on a hill with view of city lights, right? Okay. So now let's assume that you've done that. So we go out and you go on the MLS and okay, Austin said it depends on what that means to them. Good, you're getting the point of where we're headed. But prior to me saying what that means to them, which I love that you're catching on with that. Prior to me saying that though, you probably would have said, I'm going to go show you homes that have a view of the city lights that are on a hill. So let's now assume you did that. Okay, so we jump in the car, we go out, we go to the first house, we get there, and we start to look at the property. And as we walk through the property, I'm going, okay, yeah. And we get done looking at the property, and then you ask me, hey, so is this one you would want to write an offer on? And I say, no, I don't think so. Let's go look at the next one. So you take me and we go to the next property. We get to the next property, we look at it, and then, you want to write an offer? No? Okay, let's go to the next one. And so you show me, let's just say 3 or 4 properties. I don't want to write an offer on any of them. Now what are you going to do? And don't like go back to, and I don't know how many of you have gone out and shown properties yet and things, but kind of just think of like, what would you typically do at that point? Or what, let me rephrase it. What would most people probably do at that point?
Try to get more information why these houses are worth.
I wish that were true, but that's not typically what they do. Typically what they do is go look for more houses that are high on a hill with a view of the city lights. So they go try to find more, or they just say to the buyer, well, let's just kind of keep looking and just see what shows up. And so they'll go set up a search on the MLS, and then they'll have it send them to properties till they find one. And then they wait for the buyer to call and say, okay, I want to go see this property. Then they jump in the car, they go look at some more properties, and I still don't buy. Now, let me ask you this, or let me say it this way. In the meantime of that, so you're back at your office doing your thing, looking for properties for me that could meet my needs, okay? And in the process of you going and doing that, being a buyer, I'm going to do what buyers do, which is I'm going to go jump on the internet and I start doing searches for properties. Now, let me pause for a minute in the story. Let me ask you this question. How many of you have either heard or said, so you've either heard an agent say this or you've said it yourself, buyers are liars? Anybody ever heard that before? You've heard it?
You said that, just like the other day.
I did?
I swear that somebody said it.
I don't think
When
I
you're doing the liars things, you said, because you were saying it's so much easier to lie. And then we did that whole thing where for real, and I felt like an idiot after 50 for real. I think you said buyers are liars.
No, I did.
Well,
I
Rick
did.
did. Somebody did.
Rick might have, but yeah. So what about you guys online? Have you ever heard somebody say it, or have you said it yourself? Anybody on Zoom? Chad said yes. Okay. Good. Here's what I will tell you. And Robert, I'm wondering if, I'm assuming you maybe heard it from the car business. Is that true, Robert?
Totally true.
Okay. So here's what I'm going to tell you. So sorry, but I'm going to tell you that that is not true. It's all false. When you hear somebody say that, or if you have said it, buyers are liars, it is actually not true. Instead, now, I don't know if I've said this to you guys, but one of my mantras in life is power comes out of telling the truth. I just believe power comes out of telling the truth. Telling the truth is an active and a constructive process, meaning it's not words that we say, it is a process. So when I say power comes out of telling the truth, part of what I mean by that is we got to be willing to tell ourselves the truth, is really what I mean. Is usually we're lying to ourselves. Like, let me give you a quick example of that. If you have ever said, I ran out of time, is that really the truth? Have you ever run out of time? If you tell the truth, have you ever run out of time?
Sometimes,
Kind of.
but sometimes you say it, you had time.
You didn't utilize the time well.
See, that's the truth. When I say power comes out of telling the truth, that's what I mean by it. Is the truth is I didn't manage my time properly. And so as a result, though, I don't want to take responsibility for it. So I say I ran out of time. Now, culturally, we accept that. We go, oh, yeah, I get it. I've done that. But that's not the truth. The truth is, do you ever run out of time? Does time ever stop? So you didn't run out of time. And sometimes I will do a little fun thing like I did the other day, but with that on time. But for the sake of time today, because I have to be done by 11:30 today. But you don't ever run out of time. We just didn't manage it properly, and we say it as I ran out of time because it doesn't hurt so bad. And it's not us taking responsibility. So power comes out of telling the truth. Now, so when I say to you guys that buyers, when you hear somebody say buyers are liars, what they're really say, yeah. But even then, Austin, when you die, do you personally, I guess, ran out of time, but time still keeps going even after we die, right? So I guess yes.
Time does slow down though, like 2 days before vacation, that takes forever. So I'm saying it slows down.
But it doesn't really slow down. It just feels like it slows down, right?
Is that, yeah, is that time or is that this?
I'm just glad you said that, not this class time slows down.
No, we've been here for.
Yeah. Okay. So when you hear somebody say buyers are liars, here's what I want you to think from now on. From now on, when you hear that, or if you even say it, which you probably will at some point say it, stop yourself and remind yourself that really the truth is you weren't a good communicator. See, no different than I ran out of time. You didn't run out of time. You didn't plan properly. See, we take, because we did I do the running into the wall thing with you guys? I did, right? Okay. So no different than me saying, I want you to run through this wall. We sometimes get this tunnel vision of I have to do it right here, even though there's a hole in the wall right there and I could go through it. Same thing happens with us on this in terms of somebody says something, we will want to say, well, buyers are liars. But the truth is we just weren't a good communicator. I mean, if we want to tell the truth, and power comes out of telling the truth is we weren't a good communicator. And because we weren't a good communicator, and we don't want to take responsibility for it, we say buyers are liars. Okay, now, so with that, let me show you where this whole thing comes from. Buyers are liars. What did I tell you I wanted to buy?
House on the hill, see the lights.
A home high on a hill with a view of the city lights. Now, where we left off in the story was you guys were looking to try to find more homes high on the hill with a view of the city lights. I'm doing what buyers do. I'm getting on the computer and I'm starting to search for homes. I come across a home that I'm like, oh, this would be perfect. So I call you up and I say, Tim, hey, found the perfect house that I think is going to work for what we want. Can we go see it? And yeah, of course. So great. Here's the address or here's the MLS number. Okay. So we'd like to go see it as soon as we can, as soon as you can get it set up. He hangs up, he jumps on the computer, he pulls up the property. When the property comes up, it is not high on the hill with a view of the city lights. In fact, it's tucked away in a canyon surrounded by nothing but trees. And immediately, what's gonna be going through your head when you pull that up?
Why do they want this?
Well, typically your first thought is gonna be, did I get the address wrong? Because, or this is the wrong MLS because this is not on the hill. The second thought, so let's say that you think that, you call me up. Are you sure this is the address? Because this is not high on the hill. I know, but it looks just perfect for what we want. Okay. So you go show it to me. We get out there, we look at it, and I go, yeah, this is great. Let's write an offer, Tim. Will you write it up for me?
Holy cow.
Okay, good. So Tim writes it up. Now, when you get back to the office, though, you're going to say what to the other agents in the office?
That guy is so
guy.
old.
Because what did I say that I wanted?
The opposite of what you thought.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Did I buy what I said I originally wanted?
Maybe.
Okay, so I hear some no's, see some head shakes, and Trevor's giving me a maybe. What do you mean?
I mean, when he says he wants like high on the hill, like that could just mean secluded. So it depends on what he like.
Okay,
Like
good.
he said, it depends like what his needs are.
A little bit
That's
more
like,
private.
why does he want to be up there? It could just be. the
Okay,
price
good.
tag.
You're good. You guys are figuring out where we're going. So now let me show you what happened. You asked me what I wanted to buy in a home. I know what I want down here at the 90%, but I don't necessarily know how to explain that to you. So in fact, actually, let's see. Austin just said, you bought a sense of peace and tranquility. So yeah, let me ask you this, Austin. What if when you asked me the question you had written down on your paper of what I was looking for in a home, I said, I want a home that, how did he say it? I want to buy a home that gives me a sense of peace and tranquility. What would you be thinking as a buyer when I said that?
I'd be thinking, that means different things to different people. Can you give me a sense of what that means to you? Do you like a spa feel in your bathroom? Do you like to spend time outdoors and maybe have some extra room in the back, acreage? Do you want something in the city but high up so you can kind of look down through at the lights? Tell me more about that.
Okay, good. So typically what's going to happen though is that most agents don't do that. Don't do what Austin just said. Instead, what they do is so the client takes what they wanted, this peace or tranquility, we'll say, for what he said there, and they're going to then take it up to this conscious level because we don't tend to speak in terms of the feeling part of stuff. We don't talk. I mean, could you imagine I want to buy a house that makes me feel good? Like most people would be like, okay, but like, tell me the details of that. Like so because of that, that's not the way that you and I have been trained to communicate. The way that you and I have been trained to communicate is more, in fact, actually, let me just quickly give you kind of the background on where our communication comes from. Go back in time, hundreds of years ago, a couple hundred years ago. What was the man's job? That's right, to go hunt and gather, right? To go out and hunt, to get food. What was the woman's job?
Their children.
Yeah, to nurture, right? So our men tend, in terms of our communication, our language, men tend to be hunters and gatherers. In fact, since we have many ladies online, we got a few I think here, but I'm gonna have to rely on, let's see, we don't have many. We have Chow, Mariella. All right, so we got like 4. But so here's the thing, ladies, when you've had a stressful day and your significant other comes home and you start to tell them about the significant or the stressful day, do you want them to fix the problem?
No.
What do you want them to do? But so notice that, guys. But because we're hunters and gatherers,
We try to solve the issue.
we want to solve the problem. Well, you know what you should do then? And what are you thinking when we say that? Yeah.
Quiet.
Yeah, so let me tell you where I learned this the very best way. So you guys that are in California, used to be that I would come down every 6 weeks pre-COVID. And hopefully, actually, I'm going to start doing that again really soon here. But every 6 weeks, I would go down to California. Well, when I go down to California and do this, I will bust out everything we've done in the 2 weeks in a 1 week period. So I will typically go Monday through Thursday, and we'll go from 9 to 4 every day. Well, after day 2 of doing that, I go back to the hotel, and I don't know why this is, but at the end of day 2, I'm just really tired. And then day 3, to start off with, I'm more like, oh, I gotta do this again. But then all of a sudden, it's like I get my second wind and I'm good to go. So I had gone this particular time. It's Tuesday night. I go back to the hotel. I've eaten dinner, and I'm just like wiped out, tired. Because to some extent, when you're standing up and doing this all day, like it's like I'm on stage performing for you guys. And by the end of day 2, like I typically am kind of tired. So I got back to the hotel the one day, and I called my wife, and I was talking to her, and she starts telling me about the stress that my youngest is giving her. And typically I'm a normal man, and I want to be like, well, then tell him this, and you go do this and make that happen. But this particular day, I was just so tired. Like I honestly was just like, wow. The whole time she was talking, I'm like, are you serious? Oh, that's annoying. Like, that's all I did. And at the end, she goes, thank you for just listening and not trying to solve the problem. And I was like, oh yeah, you're welcome. Like all of a sudden then I pretended like, oh yeah, you bet. But the truth was, I was just like, I'm so tired. I just don't even like, I didn't have the energy to try to go fix the problem. So, but here's the thing. Because the way that we have been trained now over the last 100 years, or maybe not even quite that long, as more women have come into the workplace, it's done 2 things. One, the good news or bad news, I don't know how you want to look at it, is to some extent it has softened the men a little bit, meaning we have become a little bit more nurturing, not a lot, but a little. But women coming into the workplace has also created for them to become a little bit more of hunters and gatherers too. So it's almost like we've kind of softened it on both sides, I guess, or maybe hardened on one. But ultimately, what we tend to do in business. So I guess here's the point. Whether it's male or female, even though what we're going to talk about today, typically the women, you learn how to do it easier than the guys do. And the guys, when I try to teach this, we tend to want to be more hunters and gatherers. But in order for this to work the way it needs to work, you got to be a little bit more of the nurturing side of things. You got to not jump in and try to become a hunter and gatherer on this, okay? That's because that will create part of the problem. So here's what I'm saying. The way that you and I have been trained to communicate blocks what we're trying to accomplish. Now, with that, let me explain what it is we're trying to accomplish. Okay. So I've given you kind of this is how the brain works. So I'm going to take this a little bit deeper now into how this all works. And how I'm explaining it is actually not accurate, but it's close enough that for teaching and training it'll make more sense if I train it this way versus the actual way. But it's close enough to the actual. Does that make sense? Okay, so here's what happens. When you and I have an experience, so when we go and do something, or you have a lot of times I'll use the example of saying, if you're in a scenario that you were really, really scared because you thought you were going to die, then what will happen is that after that experience, it's traumatic, but over time, now I get that there are exceptions to what I'm saying as well, but over time, typically you could have in a car accident or something like that really scares you, that you like thought you were going to die. But over time, you kind of slowly it's not so traumatic anymore, right? Well, here's what happens with our brain is Our brain stores information in discrete locations. So it puts the pictures in one area, it puts the decisions about those things in another area, and then it puts the feelings that we have in another area. So think of it this way. Part of what I'm saying to you is the way that our unconscious works is the information is there stored in our brain, but it stores it in these discrete locations. Now, the actual way that this works is it's not like they're all necessarily stored in one area. The way your brain wires together is very messy, actually. It just kind of, but it knows where everything is. But it does it more of like if you've walked into somebody's office, and sometimes mine, that has like just papers and stuff all over the place, it's a mess. But you go, hey, I need to get the file for such and such, and they go, oh yeah, it's right here, and they know right where it's at on their desk. That's kind of really more of how our brain stores information than what I'm showing you here. But for the sake of you understanding, it's easier if I just say your brain just stores information in these discrete locations. Okay, so it puts the pictures in one area, decisions in another, and the feelings in another. Well, what happens then is when we have a time that those come back together, when the pictures, the decisions, and the feelings reintegrate. So meaning, you could have had a scary life experience and you're not necessarily walking around all day thinking about it, is what I'm saying. But if I sat down with you and said, hey, so tell me about that. You remember 10 years ago, that car accident you were in? Tell me more about, tell me what happened with that. Well, as soon as you start to tell me about it, what happens is this. Your brain goes and accesses where the pictures were from that. Then it looks at the decisions you made along the way, which then creates the feelings to show back up again. Now, when that happens, is a term that we would call, and we're going to use this a lot in what we're going to talk about the next couple of days. So I'm going to test you on this a lot. But the term is crystallization. Crystallization is the moment that the pictures, the decisions, and the feelings all reintegrate. When those pictures, feelings, and decisions come together, it creates crystallization, okay? So here's what we're talking about today. What we're going to be getting into today and tomorrow, and really a lot of today is more the groundwork for tomorrow, but we'll get into it a little bit today. But is what we're talking about is you creating crystallization. So here's what I'm saying to you. Until somebody crystallizes, until this crystallization occurs, nobody's going to buy anything. No one buys anything until crystallization occurs. So crystallization is the reintegration of the pictures, the decisions, and the feelings coming back together. Nobody's going to buy anything until that happens. So until the pictures, the decisions, and the feelings reintegrate, nobody's going to buy anything. And here's the next piece of this. Every time you have an aha moment, that is crystallization. But not every crystallization is an aha moment. So think of it that way. Every aha moment is crystallization, but not every time you crystallize is it going to be an aha moment. And that's important for you to understand. Now, here's the thing. Everything that we've been talking about so far, everything that we're going to talk about for the rest of today and tomorrow, and even actually Wednesday, is about you creating crystallization. Everything we're going to talk about is, and I'm going to teach you the skill of how to create crystallization in someone, because nobody buys anything, I don't care how insignificant it is, until crystallization occurs. Now, it's more important on a house than a candy bar, but nobody buys anything without crystallization occurring. You won't get married without crystallization occurring. You won't make a major decision without crystallization occurring. Crystallization has to happen in order for people to take the next step. And specifically, on a major step, crystallization has to occur. Now, with that being said, let's come back here now to what's going on. Now, and I'm not sure how long any of the people who are on Zoom have been licensed. I think most of you, you guys are all fairly recent, right? I don't know how long you are. Okay, so new too. So what about online? Anybody licensed longer than a year? on Zoom? So far, Brian is. Okay, so it looks like most are new. 7 days. You win the prize, Austin, I think. Anybody newer than 7 days? I don't know. Mary might be newer than 7 days. Do you have your license yet?
I do, it's just on a suspension.
Oh, well, I shouldn't have asked that.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks a lot, Russ. Okay, so, now I'm sorry.
April is coming though. It's on
Okay,
the
good.
calendar,
Yeah, Thursday's April. Okay, so here's the thing, is that one of the things then, so let me ask it this way. I'm going to change how I ask it. Here's how I would ask it then differently. Have any of you said that before you bought a house, I don't know how to explain it, but I'll know it when I see it? Anybody said that?
It's about the feeling you get when
Okay, good. So that is a very common thing. It is very common for people to say, when you sit down and ask the question of tell me what you're looking for in a home, it is going to be very common for somebody to say, I don't know how to explain it, but I'll know it when I see it. When they say that, here's what you need to understand that they're telling you. What they're saying to you is, I have the information here stored. I just don't know how to reintegrate it, bring it back together to tell you what it is that I'm looking for, but I'll know it when I see it. So let me say it another way. What they're telling you is, I haven't crystallized yet. Is the information's there. I don't know how to bring it back together to be able to explain it. So what they do then is this. They do the next best thing, which is up here at this conscious level of saying to you, I want to buy a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights. Because that's the best way they know how to explain what they're looking for down here. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Okay, so that's what they're doing, is they're saying to you, when they say, I don't know how to explain it, but I'll know it when I see it. The moment you hear somebody say that to you, they're telling you they have not crystallized. So your job then, and what we're going to talk about the next 2 days, your job is to get people to crystallize, to cause crystallization. Because when they do, here's the crucial thing. Nobody buys anything until crystallization occurs, but when they do crystallize, once that happens, they're empowered to buy. And they'll do it. Yeah, Trevor just said like this. They'll do it like that once they have crystallized. Until they've crystallized, they're going to keep him hawing and waiting. Okay, so what I'm going to teach you guys is, how do you get people to crystallize? How do you cause crystallization? That's where we're headed, and that's what we're going to talk about. Now, so let's go back to my house story. I wanted something that, and using what Austin said, peace and tranquility, it's actually a little different than that, but since that's what came up, we'll go with it. I want peace or tranquility. Well, I don't know how to say it to you other than at this logical level. So I explain it as best that I know how. I want a home that's high on a hill of view with city lights. Now, here's what happens. Remember what we're still talking about here is they get frustrated because we don't listen and we waste their time. Well, here's where that comes from, is they explain it to us at this level. So they communicate it over to us. We interpret it. Then once we take that, we put it down to what that means for us at the 90%. Now, let me show you what this looks like. You guys that are here in the room with me, be the buyer of a home, the buyer that wants a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights. What would you want it for? And if you don't want it, then just make it up. Think of like, what would be reasons people would want it for? What do you think, Slim? Why would you want, or why do you think someone would want a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights?
Entertainment possibilities. A lot of people like to watch the view, so it's nice to entertain when you have a nice view to look at.
For real? I'm just kidding.
For real.
Limited neighbors, limited traffic in front of your house.
Okay, now, and remember what you're giving me as responses. You guys on Zoom, throw some in the chat box too. Okay.
Raising my family, privacy.
Okay.
Just love never being able to get the snow off your driveway because you're so high up.
Okay, good. All right. What about Zoom? Did anybody put anything in there? Why would you want a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights? They're not participating.
I tried to participate.
I know you did. We appreciate it. Okay. Maybe they're just still typing. Okay, Josh said privacy, nice views. People find views calming. Coffee and cocktails on the deck. Okay, good. Maybe there's just a delay for them. Okay. So good. Now, let me ask you this. Now stop for a minute. If what you wanted it for, remember what you guys told me you wanted it for. Could you get the same thing that you said from a home that was tucked away in a canyon surrounded by nothing but trees?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
So yeah, so notice that. If what they really wanted was this other piece that was, privacy, could you get that from a home surrounded by nothing but trees? Yeah. See, part of what it could be is part of what we've got to do is when somebody says to you, I want a home high on a hill with view of the city lights, we got to ask more questions to find out why they want the home high on the hill. So let me give you another example of how this works. Because to some extent, we've been working a little bit on language, and I've talked to you guys a little bit about that, about how the language we use will impact the results that we get. Well, here's what happens though. So watch how subtle this is that it can create issues. And so now we've been talking about the fact that we don't listen. Well, that's where this comes from, is they communicate one thing, but they mean something else. So they communicate they want a home high on a hill with view of the city lights, but what they really meant was they wanted privacy. What they really meant was they wanted the status that goes along with it. What they really meant is they wanted to be able to go sit out on the deck and have it be a calming experience. Well, they can get that from this other property as well. So here's the key thing I want you guys to understand. People are buying that, not the feature. So think of it, I'm going to introduce you guys now to features and benefits. We talk up here in terms of features. So think of it this way. Oops. Up here is where the features reside. Down here is where the benefits are. So what happens is they really want to buy this benefit, but they don't know how to explain it. So they tell you about a feature that meets the benefit, not the feature. They tell you about a feature that would meet the benefit. Well, here's what happens. Is the other thing I want you guys to notice is notice as I said, what do you want it for? What did you say you wanted the home island?
To entertain the view.
To entertain the view. What did you want it for? Privacy. So notice those are two different things. Privacy versus entertaining. Now, watch what happens though. If what happens is Swen wants it for the entertaining, Swen wants it for the entertaining. So he says, I want a home high on a hill with a view of the city lights. Tim interprets that as he wants privacy because that's what it means to him down here is privacy. So now remember where we're still going with this is that they feel like we waste their time. So here's what happens. Tim takes Swen out to look at a property. What is Tim going to talk about in terms of the property?
Privacy aspect.
The privacy aspect. What does he want it for?
Marketing.
The entertainment side of things. So Tim's showing the property, talking about how private it is. And look, that you're going to be secluded and it's going to be so quiet. Well, I'm not listening. He's thinking, what happens? The Swen leaves and goes, that guy doesn't listen to why does he keep talking about privacy? Well, the reason we do that is because that's what it means to us. And so when I heard you wanted a home high on a hill with view of the city lights, I assumed you wanted it for privacy because that's what I would want. Now, here's another thing I'm going to say to you guys. Is it okay if we let them buy the house they want? Now, I love asking that question because people usually will laugh, and the look on Swen's face when I just said it was like, well, duh, of course we can let them buy it. But we don't, though. We get in the way of it all the time. And that's an example of it is rather than finding out that you want it for entertaining, I think I know what you want it for. So we go look at houses and I talk about why I would want it. I talk about the important features that I think are cool. So then that has the buyer going, okay, well, I don't want seclusion and quiet. Like I want fun and friends. So I don't want seclusion and quiet. So every time you go talk about the seclusion and quiet inside, they're going, well, this house isn't going to work because that's not what I want. Can you see how we get in the way of it? And that's why I say, is it okay if we let them buy the house they want? Well, if we did, we would keep our opinions out of it. Now, as I was explaining this in a class one day, I had one of the agents in the class say, well, hold on a minute. If I understand what you're saying, you're telling me I should keep my own personal views about the property out of the way. And I said, yeah, that is what I'm saying. And they said, well, wait a minute. Like, I tell every buyer they need to check the sex offender registry before they buy the house. And are you telling me I shouldn't do that? And I said, well, hold on. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, meaning what I'm saying though is, like, we have a due diligence form in Utah. I can't remember what it's called in California. You guys have one that's similar, that's basically says, if you're concerned about it as a buyer, you should check it out. You should do your research. So I'm not, if they're concerned, they should 100% check it out. But what I'm saying is, you have to keep your opinions out of it. So here's what I did with the agent is, and I'm going to start to do this with you guys too, as I shouldn't tell you this because then you won't ask me questions. But as you ask me questions about this process, I'm going to throw this same kind of a thing back to you. And here's what I said to her is I said, well, let me ask you this question. And I can't remember what her name was. I could see her face, but I asked this lady, I said, let me ask you a question. Would you ever buy a house without checking the sex offender registry? And she said, never. See, this is another example of, can you let them buy the house they want, not the one you think they should have? Is because she thought, because now here's the other thing. The reason we do that, the thing that gets in the way of this, why we do that is we think, everybody thinks that eventually everyone else is going to figure out they were right. All of us. I don't care what it is. You assume that what you think about politics, religion, whatever, any of those things, you assume that eventually everyone else is going to figure out you were right. All of us do that. We all assume that eventually later on people will figure out we were right. We all think that. Well, because we think that, we think we're doing them a favor by pointing out to them, hey, you should check the sex offender registry. Well, if they aren't really worried about it, oh, Chad said I'm right. Yeah, Chad, why aren't you here? That's so much funnier in person. I know. So, or at least unmute and say it, Chad. But yeah, so what happens is that we all assume that we're right. So we think we're doing it for their benefit. We think we're helping them by telling them, hey, you should check this out, or you should do this or that. Well, but here's the thing. If they're not, well, here's what I actually said to her is this. What if they bought the home and the next door neighbor is a sex offender, he just hasn't been caught?
Why did you say that?
Well, because my point is, here was my point, is I know people who have gotten on the sex offender registry for peeing in the parking lot. Like, they're not going to do anything to you. But so part of my point was, you don't really know that just because somebody's on there, you shouldn't be their neighbor any more than you could say, you know, that the person living next door just hasn't been caught yet. And I'm not trying to be like a jerk about it, but to some extent, I'm like, it's fine to, I probably should come up with a better example, because I know as I tell this, there are some people that are going to be like, no, you should be checking the sex offender registry list before you move in. And I'm not on it, by the way, you can go check. But the point just is, all of us have this. Here's my point of this whole story. Every single one of us has something like that. You have something that you feel is important. Like, for example, for me, my first house that I bought, now for you guys in California, I'll have to explain part of what I'm saying on this, but in Utah, for you guys in California, there is a difference between having a north-facing house or a south-facing driveway, not house, driveway. What is it, guys? Why? Yeah, a south-facing driveway, the snow is going to melt a lot faster than a north-facing driveway. My first house had a north-facing driveway, and I swore I would never do that again. Well, when I built this second house that I told you guys the story about the other day, it was going to be, the driveway was going to be west-facing, but then the builder came back and said, we can't fit a 3-car garage on that lot if it's west-facing. If you'll turn the garage sideways so that it's now north-facing, you could do a 3-car garage. Well, I wanted a cul-de-sac more than I was worried about north-facing, so I said, go ahead and do it. Well, I hate it. So for me, I always feel like when I'm helping somebody, that if we walk into a house that has a north-facing driveway, that I want to say to that person, you're going to hate that the snow doesn't melt in your driveway. Or let me give you the other example and this one I've never actually said that. This one I've actually done many times before I got trained in this. Before I got trained in this, let me show you what it looked like if I sat down with you as a buyer. I would have said, what style of home do you want? And then they would have told me whatever style it was. Or if they said, well, I don't know, style matters. I would have said this. Now, nobody be offended if you live in this type of a house because it's just personal opinion. But I would have said, well, you don't want a split entry though, right? Now, remember I did the exercise with language about why don't you give me some money and how much money did I get? None. Same thing applies with this. If I said to a buyer, you don't want to buy a home that has a split entry, which for you guys in California, you guys don't have these houses. Split entry is you walk into the front door, and there's like a landing that's like maybe 8 by 8, I don't know, something like that. And then you immediately have to either go upstairs or downstairs into the basement. And since California doesn't really have houses with basements, you don't have this split entry kind of thing. But I just personally don't like them. Guess how many houses I sold? And I've actually never stopped to look this up. I should go look it up on the MLS. But prior to me being trained on this, which was in about 2000, and so I'd had my license 3.5-ish, 4 years. Prior to me being trained on this, I would be surprised if I sold more than 1 or 2 houses that were a split entry to a buyer. Now, why do you think that would be? Because I would bring my biases in and say, you don't want one of those, do you? And now keep in mind, if a buyer is neutral on it, they're going to kind of go, no, we wouldn't want one of those. Because why? Why would they do that? Yeah, because they think I'm the expert. And if I'm the expert and I'm saying, now you don't want to buy a split entry, if they really want one, then yeah, they're probably going to know that's what we want. But if they don't, if they're kind of neutral on it, they're going to go, oh yeah, no, probably not. So now guess what? I'm not going to go show them. Now here's where I really learned this. I know, exactly. So here's what happened though, is where I learned this, and I actually said buyers are liars, by the way, in this scenario. So I had a buyer that I did that with. You don't want to buy a split entry, right? And they were like, yeah, no, we don't want one of those. Okay, great. So I go out showing them properties. They won't buy, they won't buy, they won't buy, they won't buy. All of a sudden they call me one day, just like I did with you guys on the home in the canyon. Call me up, hey Russ, we found a house we want to go see. Okay, sure. I jump on the MLS, I pull it up, it's a split entry. And I'm like, are you serious? Like I didn't say that to them, but I'm thinking like, they told me they didn't want split entries. Now notice, they told me they didn't want it, but did they really tell me they didn't want it? Or I told them they didn't want it. See, this is why I say, is it okay if we let them buy the house they want? See, what happened was I convinced them they didn't want it. Well, now here's the other thing. I would never buy a house without a garage either. So I would tell people when we would sit down and I would ask these questions that I had you guys write down, I would say, okay, so how many car garage do you want to have? 1 or 2? And to some extent, I would never buy a 1-car garage. So usually my question was, did you want 2 or 3? See, I'm going to give them the options that I think they should have rather than asking what they want. Now, as a result of that, same thing. I'll bet you I didn't sell many houses without a garage. These same people call me, we want to go see this house. I pull it up. It's a split entry, no garage. And I remember saying to an agent in the office, buyers are liars. They told me they wanted a garage. They told me they didn't want a split entry. But did they really? No. It was me that created it. See, we will project onto people what we think they should do. That's why I said to you, is it okay if we let them buy the house they want? Okay, now, let's do this now. So here's your first test. What is the purpose of us doing this needs analysis with people?
Narrow down a little bit, at least.
Okay.
To figure out what your actual needs are, what their needs are.
Okay, you're on the right track.
If you're really, like, if you do well, like with your client, or you grow your business,
Let me give you a hint.
it'll
Crystallization.
Oh. Like, what do you do?
Yeah, good job. I don't know who, oh, Chow just wrote that. Good. Yes, the whole point, and I'm gonna keep hammering you guys on this, because here's the thing. This skill set has a short shelf life if you don't use it. If you don't use the skill, you'll lose it. And the first way you lose it is you'll forget that the purpose of us doing what we're doing is to cause crystallization. Why?
That's the only way you're
Because that's the decide to buy.
They're not going to buy or sell. We're talking about buyers right now, but sellers too. They're not going to buy or sell until crystallization occurs. Until that occurs, they're not going to buy. So we got to create it. We have to create the crystallization. Now, the way that you and I have been trained to communicate actually blocks. The way that you and I have been trained to communicate actually blocks crystallization. Now, let me show you what I mean. Okay, so for you guys that are on Zoom, will you type in on the chat box the 2 or the 3 questions that you would ask? Now, don't cheat on this. Don't change it based on what we've talked about. That's why I asked you to write it down in the beginning. For the guys here in class, I can see if they're really doing it. But for you guys on Zoom, type in the chat box the questions you would ask me as a buyer that would help you to know what I'm looking for. Now, I'm going to have you guys tell me yours. Now, I'm going to interact with the people here in the room, but we could do the same thing with your question. So I'm going to be the buyer. I'm going to have you ask me the question, and I'll respond, and then we'll go through your 2 or 3 questions. You can only ask me the questions you have written down, okay? So don't free flow it now. You have to ask what you wrote down before, okay? All right, here we go. Watch this, okay? Or don't watch, listen.
All right, Russ, what area, is there a particular area that you would like to live
Just somewhere in the Central Valley.
in? Somewhere in the Central Valley? All right, will you tell me just a little bit about your family, like size-wise?
Well, at home now, it's just my wife, me, and my son. That's it.
Just wife, son?
We have one.
You have, at home, do you have any other
I have
kids?
2 other kids that are married.
Okay, are they close by? Or
Yeah.
have grandkids or anything like that?
No,
Okay, so no
kids,
grandkids yet.
grand dog.
Grand dog, all right, but future plans, right?
Yeah.
Correct, so maybe a house that has some space for later on get family gatherings.
Did you write that down as a question?
I guess that's the third question. And my questions are kind of general area, family.
Okay, well, that's what I want. So,
Yeah.
okay, good.
So get more information about the family and go.
Read me your question, and I'll respond.
Where do you want to live? What area?
So somewhere kind of in the central part of that.
Keep going with that. What's your price range?
Don't know, haven't been pre-approved, so I don't know.
That won't work. How long do you want to stay in them?
Good question. I'm not sure. Number of years. Okay.
What's the most important thing to have at home for you?
For me, I want to have an open living space and then probably a 4-car garage.
Okay. And then are you willing to buy a home that might need work?
Yeah, probably. Okay.
What is something you need in your future home? Like number of rooms, garage?
So I probably would want at least 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, and 4-car garage.
Okay. And then do you need a yard or?
It's debatable.
Okay.
I mean, I don't want one. My
We
wife
can work
wants
with
one.
that. We'll see, we'll see. And then what areas are you guys interested in?
Somewhere in the central part of the valley.
Okay, awesome.
What are you looking for in a home?
4 bedrooms, 3 baths, 4-car garage.
Perfect. Where do you want to move to?
Somewhere in the central part of the valley.
Awesome. What style house are you looking for?
Probably a 1-story. Okay. Now, there is nothing wrong with your questions. Let me see what we got here from these guys. So let me tell you what you guys.
How do you want your home
So I'm going to skip Chad's because we're going to use that.
I want it to be
All right.
literally.
So let's see. Chad said, what area or neighborhoods do you have in mind? Any type of homes? Austin said, tell me a little bit about how you'd like to use your home. Tell me how is your dream home? What are your needs? Why are you looking for a home? What's in specific is it that you're looking for? What do you like in the neighborhood? Where do you work? What would you like to improve in your home if you're not a first-time buyer? Can you tell me what your home needs to have to make it perfect for you? And then specifics of the home. Okay, nothing wrong with any of those questions. But notice, in fact, actually, Trevor, will you interact with me on it? Will you come up here so that, in fact, I'm going to lose everything I've typed for you guys for a minute, but oh well. Okay, come up here, Trevor, so that these guys can see you. I probably should have you sign a consent that it's okay for me to record you on video. All right, good.
Good.
Okay, so here's what we're going to do. So Trevor and I are going to play a game of pass the baton. Okay, now here's the rules of the game. The only person that can talk is the person holding this.
Okay.
No, see, you lost. You just failed.
I knew I was going to fail. I said,
Okay.
I was going to say this.
No, I'm teasing. But so now watch. What I want you guys to do is to pay attention to watch our communication, but the only person who can talk. Now, I want you guys to pay more attention to the body language than anything. So listen to the words and things, but pay attention more to the body language, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you this. I'm going to have you ask me your first question. You'll hand me the baton. I'll respond, then I'll hand it back. Got it?
What are you looking for in a home?
We want to have probably 4 bedrooms at least, 3 baths at least, full baths, and 4-car garage.
Okay, perfect. Where are you looking to move to?
Just somewhere kind of the central part of the valley.
What kind of style house are you looking to buy?
Probably a 1-story.
That was all my questions.
Well, keep it going though, just
Okay.
because I just want them to see what happens.
Okay, awesome. If you could change anything about the current home you're living in, what would it be?
It's a 2-story, and I'm probably ready for a 1-story, and I don't want as much yard work, although my wife wants more yard work.
Okay, so would like an HOA be something you consider, like if they took care of the yard and stuff like that?
Well, I'm in an HOA right now, but I take care of my yard.
Okay, so one that did take care of your yard?
Yes, that'd be okay.
Okay. So what's like the kid situation? Would you be okay to downsize, or would the room still be as important as it is right now?
I don't really want to downsize, no.
Okay, awesome. What are you looking to sell?
Okay, good. Give him a hand. Thanks. Okay, so let me ask you guys, what did you tell me what you noticed from that exchange? Okay, so Trevor said it's hard. Why?
Because you pay more attention to like try to head it back and talk in place than what people are actually saying. You're more worried about already having something to say than paying attention to react.
Okay, good. Notice that.
Yeah, your only option really is for Trevor was to go to the next question.
I just
You didn't get to address any of
have a
your,
conversation. I just
yeah,
think
you
that's
didn't get a
the
build on your answer at all.
Yeah, now to some extent, I a little bit was creating that a little bit because of to demonstrate it, meaning I just was only answering this question and handing it back versus a real client might talk a little more than what I did. So I was being a little bit difficult, but I'm doing it on purpose to just show you that, like, notice what happens is the way you and I have been trained to communicate is typically to hunt and gather. So essentially that's what he was doing, was hunting and gathering. Essentially he was asking me, do you want this? Do you want that? Do you want this? And our default becomes we want to start giving people the option. Now there are times to do that, by the way, but initially, what are we trying to create?
crystallization.
Okay, you're doing better. Good. Yeah, we're trying to create crystallization. And crystallization is not going to occur through hunting and gathering. It's not going to occur through how many this, how many that, where this, where that. Like it has to be done differently. So let me show you what I mean. So will you come back up, Trevor? Now this time I'm the agent, you're the client.
Okay.
So now I'm going to show you guys different. Pay attention to the difference. Oh, actually, real quick before we do it, you can stay. What did you guys notice in terms of body language of how we were communicating? Anything?
I mean, your hands were just in your pocket. I mean, you guys are both kind of stiff.
Well, but did you notice when I wanted to talk though,
You were reaching.
I went like this, like, give me the baton. I want to say something. But he was like, I would do this, or sorry, he was holding it, but I'm like going like this, like, okay, give me the, like, I kind of wish that when we really were communicating that we had to pass a baton back and forth, Because you would be able to tell when people aren't listening anymore, because the moment they put their hand out like this, like they're saying, I've got my next thing to say, I'm not listening to you anymore, which is kind of what was going on. Okay. Now, so now we're going to do it again. This time you're the, oh, actually one more thing. Who is the pressure? To do what? Yeah, to keep coming up with more questions until he was like, I don't know, let's go look at house. Right? That's what we tend to do. Now, this time though, what we're going to do is I'm the agent, he's the client. Watch the difference. Okay. Now, are you okay with talking about the home and kind of what you would be looking for, stuff like that? Let's play the game still. All right. So describe for me your ideal home.
Well, I want something with a little bit of space. I want to have a lawn, but not too big to take care of. But I also want to have space for like cars and everything like that. So garage space would be more important than like the house itself, I guess.
Okay, cool. Yeah. What else?
Need to have room for dogs.
Okay, so dogs, that's cool. What else?
I don't know. As long as I'm not too picky, probably just one level because cardio's bad. Stairs are hard.
Okay, so cardio is bad, stairs are at one level. Okay, sure. Tell me more.
No, you. Tell you more.
Oh, more about the house.
Well, I want it to be, like I said, kind of secluded. So maybe like out in Harriman, kind of away from people, but close enough to roads that I can still get to stuff conveniently.
Okay, yeah, you're doing a really good job. Keep going.
It has to be blue.
Okay, all right, so now watch. What was the difference? What's the difference of how I did it versus how when he was doing it?
You just still put the pressure on me.
Yeah, he still had the pressure because notice what I did. Now notice how I started. Describe for me your ideal home. Now remember how the brain works. The brain works like a computer.
Logic.
So by me saying, describe for me your ideal home, I'm instructing his brain to go down and start to drill down to go to get that information. Now, I don't know if you guys were paying attention at this level, but as soon as he handed me back the baton, all I did was said, that's great, keep going. Or that's great, tell me more. Or what else?
You almost like repeat and reaffirmed everything in a simple way. Just that's awesome.
And then I said, yeah, keep going. Then did you guys notice what he did after the first time when I did that? And I said, hey, you're doing great, keep going.
His eyes rolled back and he started thinking really deep.
That's right. See, what happens is this.
He almost passed out.
Yeah. So what happens is this. They are used to communicating with us at that conscious level. And so as a result of that, when I said, describe your ideal home, he did it first at the conscious level. But as soon as I say, keep going, he's forced now to go, oh, like part of what's going on is at an unconscious level, they're going, oh, he really wants to know. And so it caused him to then actually go into, and you notice him start to really think, which typically when we do that, we are going to go, let's see. Or we're going to look down or something. They're going to do some type of whatever they do when they're thinking is what he did. And what they will do is they're going to, oh, well, let's see. Yeah, what else do I want? Now, remember, what are we trying to cause? Crystallization. And the way that we're going to cause it is by getting them to pictures, decisions, and the feelings. So in essence, by me saying, what do you want? I'm forcing his brain to now start to think about the pictures and the decisions he's made to start telling me. Now, are you thinking about buying a house right now? Okay. So, because I would have guessed no, that he wasn't, because he was not being very interactive on it.
Yeah, not very.
Yeah, so somebody who's really thinking about it when you do that, they love this because they're like, oh, like you.
Well, I know. Yeah. Well,
yeah. Well, so I want this because remember I talked about percolation the other day? Because they've been percolating, when I say describe for me your ideal home, they start to tell me all the stuff they've been percolating. Does that make sense? All right, give Trevor a hand again. Good job. See, pressure's always on you. If you come up here to help me with an exercise, pressure's on you. All right. All right, so I have to wrap up now because I got a meeting at 11:30 I got to get to. So let me just kind of, what?
I've shown at 12:30.
Oh, so here's the thing. So tomorrow, what we're going to pick up on is the first thing that we're going to do. I'm going to walk you through the process tomorrow. So today was all kind of like setting you up to understand it. tomorrow we're going to get into the process. So the first thing we're going to do is we talk about what I used with Trevor was called a directive. We want to talk in terms of the directives. Directives instruct the brain. So what I did was by saying, describe for me your ideal home is a directive. I'm directing his brain to describe for me what his ideal house would look like, okay? And then I'm going to walk you through basically a 3-step process on that is what we're going to do tomorrow of how do we do that? Because what we've got to do is get them to crystallize, because until somebody crystallizes, they're not buying or selling for that matter. But since we're right now talking the buyer side, they're not going to buy. Okay. So that's what, so tomorrow I'll do a quick refresher on some of this stuff. Then we're going to jump into how do we get them to crystallize? How do we go from features to the benefits? Sound good?
Perfect.
All right. I got like 4 minutes. Any questions for today before we wrap? You guys that are online, make sure you throw into the chat box first and last name and office if you didn't already.
Hey, Russ.
Yeah.
Hey, I just had a comment, not a question really. So we were talking about features and benefits.
Yeah.
I went to a class once that talked about features, advantages, and benefits. The feature is what it is, the advantage is what it does, and the benefit is what it does for the buyer. So that's where it makes it real personal for them.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. Thanks, Chad. Yeah, it's ultimately, because that's the thing that's driving this, is there's some benefit that is driving this to take place, and it's the benefit that they're buying, not the feature. So perfect. Yeah, thanks, Chad. Okay, see you guys tomorrow. I will I'll have a sheet for you tomorrow with some scripts and stuff as well. So watch for that. So we'll see you in the morning.
Thank you.
Thanks, Russ.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there like 2 Jadens and 1 Q? Or is it just?
I don't know.